You've tuned into Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes. Your access to success strategies and more to help you move onward and upward with your life. Listen in each week as she interviews others who have really taken their essence to the next level and truly unpaused their life. Now here's your host, Dr. Callie Estes.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is Dr. Callie Estes, and I am founder of the Addictions Academy, the Addictions Coach, and Rehab Rescue. Welcome to Unpause Your Life. This is a great podcast where we showcase people who have done something extraordinary with their life. I welcome you, and I hope you enjoy all of our guests.
On my way, found a reason to wake up another day.
You are listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Callie Estes, the Addictions Coach and the Addictions Academy, and I'm very excited for my guest today. I have Chief Thomas Synan Jr. with me today, and his wide experience has allowed him to have a unique look into the heroin crisis. Mr. Synan is a United States Marine Corps veteran and a 25-year police veteran with the Newtown Police Department. For the last 10 years as police chief and as SWAT Team Leader veteran. I'm going to ask you some questions about the SWAT. I've always been fascinated with them. In 2014, after watching the last of an entire family die from drugs, the last two from heroin, Mr. Synan met with other members in Hamilton County and helped form the Hamilton County Heroin Coalition, where he sits on the steering committee and chair Interdiction. Mr. Synan coordinates law enforcement efforts to reduce supply and works with other members to help reduce demand. Mr. Synan was asked to testify in Washington, D.C. at U.S. Senate Homeland Security Committee, giving testimony on synthetic opiates and the impact fentanyl and carfentanil have had on the country. Mr. Synan was a speaker with President Clinton and other distinguished panelists for the Clinton Foundation discussing the opioid crisis at Johns Hopkins University. His work with the opiate epidemic has been recorded and archived in the National Law Enforcement Museum in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Mr. Synan.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Excited to be on with you.
Yeah, well, that bio was a mouthful. My God, you've done everything. It's pretty awesome.
It's been a lot. Unfortunately, this area was hit pretty hard, so many of us kind of got our learning from experience right on the street. So, yeah, unfortunately, we have some experience in this.
So tell me how you got into the drug side. You started out as a Marine veteran and a police chief. What made you get into this as opposed to something else?
Well, sure. I'm a chief of a small town. It's about 3,000 people. It's about 11 miles east of downtown Cincinnati. And I never expected that we would see the drug issues that we saw even in my small community. And it started with a mother, and she had 3 sons. And she was addicted to prescription pills and abused alcohol, and she had some issues with that. But her youngest son was shot and killed buying crack cocaine. Then a few months later, she died from complications from the addiction. Then the oldest brother overdosed on heroin, and he left behind 5 children.
Oh,
and
wow.
Yeah, the 5 children, of the 5, 3 are addicted. If I would have talked to you a week ago, I would have said 3 are in jail, but 1 is out now in a halfway house. We've been trying to work with her for several years and get her help, so she's back into treatment. Another one's in jail, and then 1 is homeless, and unfortunately he's using at the moment. And then there's 2 younger twins. And then the last brother, who I had a lot of history with, even though it's a small town, he actually set my personal car on fire when I first started.
What?
He was on drugs, and him and another kid were drinking, and they mistook my car for another officer who had arrested him. So they poured gasoline thinking it was the other officer's car and set it on fire. So he and I had a long history. And even with that history, he would fight with us. He would run. There was always some kind of trouble with him, but having been around that house and seeing the way the boys grew up and the way the mother from addiction and her abuse from boyfriends and marriages, it just, you had empathy for the family. So I always took it as looking at where he grew up. So he kind of had a little bit of a soft spot in my heart, even though he did this stuff. Well, he was the last brother, and back in 2014, About a week or so before Thanksgiving, I got a call from my officers at home, and they said, hey, his name was Charles, but we all called him Chucky. And they said, hey, Chucky's down here at the station. He overdosed. He was brought back with Narcan, and he's crying, and he doesn't want to die. And at the time, we didn't have a coalition. We didn't have a lot of resources, especially a small town. We didn't know where to turn. So I said, well, look, we got to find help for him, whether it's treatment or take him to University of Cincinnati Hospital. We got to do something. We'll figure out how to pay for it. We'll figure out how to take care of it. Well, having a better understanding of addiction now, I kind of think that sometimes people fear success almost as much as they fear failure, having to go through the work, and what if you don't succeed, and then I have to go through the whole process again. So he refused any help, and I said, well, we got to keep him alive for at least one more night, so take him to jail. So that's what we did, and we accomplished our mission. We kept him alive for one more night. He got out of jail, came back home, did what was left of the heroin, and overdosed and died. And that's when I realized I'd watched an entire family, entire generation die from drugs. And it's not just this generation. Now we're dealing with the kids from the brothers that were left behind, and grandparents are raising some of those kids. So we have 3 generations in my small town that have been impacted by addiction, and the last 2 with opiates.
Wow. I wish I could say that's a unique situation, but unfortunately that's not a unique situation. There's so many people impacted with this opiate crisis, and it goes all the way back to the parents, and then the grandparents end up raising their grandbabies because their kids couldn't get straight, and then the grandbabies end up addicted. So it's like this perpetual hamster wheel that we just can't seem to get off of. Now, I want to ask you a question from the other side of the fence, because I see, the families and the people addicted. What are you seeing with the dealers and the people bringing the drugs in on your end? What is that looking like?
Well, that's kind of changed. When it was cocaine and crack cocaine, there was a lot of organized dealing, such as Bloods and Crips and gangs. And you could identify that gang and then kind of chop off the head of it, and then the whole snake would collapse. But with this, it is just local street dealers, and also with it being so accessible, with it coming through the mail, that has just changed how you enforce laws, how you deal with dealing. And also the sheer numbers are overwhelming. So when we talk about 72,000 Americans dying from overdoses, you also got to think about what is it on the supply side. Jails are overcrowded. The juvenile foster care system is overcrowded. I mean, the system is so overwhelmed and bursting at the seams. I get a lot of people who get upset about the user overdosing 7 or 8 times, but I didn't hear that outcry when we would arrest a dealer 7 to 8 times. Being on SWAT, I did numerous search warrants and plan those search warrants, and it was not uncommon to have arrest a dealer 7, 8 times, sometimes within the same week. So the dealing side of it has changed in that it's so widespread. There's still organization from the cartel side, but there's so many people involved in it. And again, when you get it through the mail, how do you even enforce that? You don't even know what's coming through or where it's going.
That's so interesting. So I'm in Miami, and I do, the drug of choice down here is cocaine for the higher end party people, and of course heroin for the lower end. And one of my clients came to me, and he had overdosed 7 times. And I said, okay, at this point, you're going to tell me where you're getting this stuff, because obviously it's the same person. It's a bad batch. So he told me. And it was so interesting because I had to go file a police report and say, this is the person that's dealing. Well, they went to pick up and arrest the gentleman, and he had overdosed on his own supply. So it was like this. It was, horrible somebody died, but at the same time, it was a relief for the community, because this is somebody that's bringing in fentanyl and carfentanil at mass quantities and taking out half the population that finally took care of its own self, sort of a thing. So we're seeing that down here now is almost like, because the dealers are using their supply and kind of, I don't want to say taking themselves out, but it's kind of what's happening. So it's not a bad thing, but it's a bad thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's so much difference with it. So there's some dealers who use, but there's some that don't. If you're actually doing a good business, you're probably not using, because then you would be going through the withdrawals. You'd have to get the supply. It'd be very difficult. So, but we're seeing a wide variety of things. And this is probably what it's been forever, dealing with drug addiction, dealing with dealers, is we have some dealers that are straight out dealing fentanyl and carfentinal on our streets. We have people dealing crack cocaine, methamphetamine. And you have some people that don't even know they're dealing. They may be a low-level street dealer, who doesn't even know it's in their drug supply. So when you take in all these factors, it becomes a big problem. And again, through the mail, we have a community close to mine. It's a city, and they had two business people that were getting in large shipments of fentanyl. They were using their business as the place where it would be shipped. It was a packing company. And then they were dealing out, and they were also, in the case like you're talking about, using also. And that's actually what ended up getting them, was them using. They gotten caught and then found out this big operation. So there's so many different ways for dealing now. And like everyone's read the book in Dreamland, the pizza delivery kind of thing. The shifting of how people deal with drugs and how easy it is, especially with the internet, has really shifted how we try to enforce it, and also what's in the drug supply. I mean, you talk about that one dealer. Think about how many more dealers there are out there. Think about how much drugs are actually coming into the United States. I've heard an estimate that we only stop about 3 to 5% actually coming into the United States. So that tells you how many drugs are out there and what the supply's like, and then in turn, demand.
That's crazy. I mean, 3 to 5%, and we're seeing the death rate now. Imagine if we, had a bigger percent that we could capture. We would drop our death rate. It's crazy.
Well,
so,
just think if we didn't have Narcan.
I know. Narcan saved my husband. I don't know if you read my book. I mean, my husband overdosed 3 different times, and if there wasn't Narcan, he wouldn't be here. So
Absolutely.
It's crazy because people, on my side, on the clinical side, always said how they were against Narcan. It was, you're saving the junkies so they go back out and use. And I've always said, well, I'm not sure how I feel about it until it happened to me. And then it was like, well, thank God for Narcan, because he wouldn't be here, along with several of my other clients, because, it's something that is necessary. It's something that's needed, even though it's controversial.
Yeah, it's funny because as a cop, I get pushed back on 2 things when I go out and speak and talk about this topic. The first one is getting tougher on the dealers, which is kind of strange. I'm like, you guys do see them in a uniform. I'm a cop. That's actually what I'm supposed to be. So yeah. I get a lot of pushback on that. But then I get pushed back, not as much as it used to when we first started about 4 or 5 years ago. But when it first started and going out and giving talks, man, I got a lot of pushback on Narcan, which actually surprised me. Because as a law enforcement officer, I am not asked, and it would happen publicly. I cannot think of any other group that I was publicly, openly asked to just let die. Yeah. And I would sit there and, well, I was astonished that you just want me to let somebody die. I've been on car crashes where it's the person's 4th or 5th drinking and driving. Not once did society tell me to let them die. I've been on an attempted suicide run 12 times, and not once did society tell me to let that person die. Matter of fact, they said, you should risk your life to save theirs. So when I talk about saving someone's life with Narcan, it astonished me that we were having this open discussion about letting people die. Now, the issue is so complex that everyone has validity in their argument except for that. That's the only thing I will not entertain, is someone telling me as a police officer, as a first responder, someone who's dedicated to save lives, to just let somebody die. I don't care if it's because of drugs, whatever it is. That's not my position, and I shouldn't. No law enforcement officer or first responder should be thinking that way.
That's so interesting you said that, because there was a police officer down here that was publicly against Narcan when Miami put it in play that all the Miami cops had to carry it. And he flat out said, and he got caught on camera, he lost his job over it. He flat out said, well, I'm not going to save a junkie's life. And he got caught when he said it, and it went up the chain, and they released him of duty. And they said, part of your duty is to protect and serve. You don't get to choose who you protect and serve. Protect and serve means protect and serve.
Absolutely. Would I not give CPR to a smoker? Would I not save someone who was drinking and if they went unconscious? The only thing that makes this different than any of the other addictions generally is that it's illegal. So we're having this stigma because it's illegal, which is a legitimate stigma, because you can't say it's not. You can't not have that stigma when it's a crime for using the drugs. But we don't do this with any other group. And I don't think we should be doing it with this group. It's not my duty to say if someone lives or dies. And I have this incredible drug called Narcan. And I tell people, I wish Narcan saved everybody first from COPD, heart attacks, asthma, diabetes. I wish that drug would take care of everything. But I don't have that ability, and I don't have that drug at hand. If I did, trust me, we would use it. I wish that there was a drug that was invented. But right now, Narcan saves people's lives that are using opiates. And there is a big issue with it right now. And I tell people, too, a lot of times when I hear people tell me that they should let somebody die, my response back is, you may not have stood over a body of someone who overdosed, because if you had, you would recognize that there's a mother, father, brother, sister, son, and daughter attached to that person. It's easy to dismiss the one, but you cannot dismiss the family. And that's the toughest part, as you know, dealing with the family who's lost someone and the grief that they feel, the shame, the guilt, all the things that they run through and the struggle they had. So to me, letting someone die is off the table. It's not even part of the discussion I'll entertain.
So let me ask you this question, because you were in the Marine Corps and got into police work and SWAT. What, of all the things you've done, what has been the most fulfilling?
Oh, I mean, the job itself is fulfilling. I would have to say this without a doubt. The addiction part has been the most impactful. I've had this incredible opportunity to not just impact my community, but my state and country and go and speak around the world and do media around the world. So this has probably been the most impactful. But as a police officer, you never forget those one-on-one things when you help somebody or talking to a kid, you know, especially in a small town. What I always felt is rewarding was when a kid knew your first name and felt comfortable coming up and talking to you, and then being able to pass it on to the other officers. Actually, one of the daughters of the oldest brother that died is here in the parking lot almost every day between 3:30 and 4 o'clock with her friend, and she's talking to the police officers. So to me, that's the most rewarding thing, is being able to have that personal contact and know that you have an impact, not just on that person, but then the rest of the officers who then will carry on that legacy and also perform the same way. As difficult as this job is, as demanding as it is, especially with being videotaped and social media and the opiate epidemic and everything else that goes on, it is without a doubt one of the best careers I could ever have. I've got to truly experience life from just a patrolman to a SWAT officer to dealing with the opiate epidemic. Man, I've experienced every part of life, so it's been extremely rewarding.
Oh, I watch live PD. That's as close as I get to the whole adrenaline rush. It's like living through you guys. And let me tell you, they had a SWAT on there with the body cam. I was sweating it out. I couldn't breathe. I was like, oh my God, the stuff that you guys do is insane. Like busting in, and the one guy got shot. It was just insane. So I gotta give kudos to you and thank you for the work you do, because it is rough to do that kind of stuff.
Oh, it's funny. My very first SWAT raid, I went on a drug raid about 3 o'clock in the morning, and, you know, I'm a Marine Corps veteran, just got done or became police chief, had at the time 15 years experience. So I thought for sure I'd handle the SWAT thing really easily. So we're on our way to our target, and we're in the back of the SWAT van. And I tell people, if you've never been in the back of a SWAT van at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's extremely intense. So I started thinking in my head, man, I can't breathe. I can't feel my hands. I can't feel my feet. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I'm a police chief. I've been a cop for 15 years. Why am I so worked up? And they told us in the briefing that when the van stops, you get out and everyone lines up on the passenger side and we'll walk up to the target. Well, the van stops. I jump out of the van and I look back and everyone's still in the van. And he's now the commander of the SWAT team. He looks at me and goes, hey, Synan, what the hell are you doing? And I said, well, sir, they said that when the van stops, you jump out and stack up on the passenger side and then we go to the house. He goes, yeah, we're not at the house yet. We're at a red light. Get back in the van.
Oh my God.
That was my very first grade. And I gotta tell you, man, we went into this house and there's flashbangs and people screaming. I just stood there with my mouth open. People were looking at me like, you're never going to be able to do this. And then 10 years later, I ended up becoming a team leader and working through it. But no, the stress and how fast things happen and how much your brain's got to process information, it is extreme, especially when you're the first one through the door. So it is without a doubt one of the most intense things I've done, along with the Marine Corps. But yeah, I'm getting a little bit older, so I can't handle that intensity too much anymore.
Like I said, I saw this one where they raided the house and the kid, long story short, he had some mental health issues. They were there 2 or 3 times throughout the night, and then they went in to do a mental health call, and they opened the door and he opened fire and he shot the 3 officers out of nowhere. So they called for SWAT because one of the officers was stuck in there. So you have 3 officers down out of 5. They're calling for SWAT, and then, so they went from that to the SWAT body cam, and it went up a whole nother level. It wasn't just like adrenaline. It was like insane. And there's like, no, you guys don't talk. It's all code. And I was just like, oh, I thought it was like I was there. And I was like, there's no way. My adrenaline was pumping just sitting in the chair. I'm pumping now just talking about it. I was all excited, you know, like, wow, that's insane. So I can't imagine transitioning from that to this, because this is intense too, when you're dealing with drug addiction and overdose and dying and people crying. And I mean, your job is crisis pretty much all the time, but at the same time, it's so rewarding when you get that one person that goes, you saved my life. Something you said, something you did saved my life. So are you seeing more of that come out of this as opposed to funerals?
Well, we're still seeing a lot of funerals. So in my county, when we first started the coalition, we had about 404 overdose deaths. And then in 2017, we had 570. We've dropped down to about 440, so it's still a lot. I mean, more people in our county die from, and probably across the country too, die from auto accidents and homicides combined. So there's still a lot of death, but you're starting to see more hope. You're starting to see more recovery, and especially with law enforcement coming out. And here's the thing about law enforcement. We've been some of the leaders advocating and changing this fight and changing how we deal with addiction. We've been some of the most outspoken. And it's taken time to build that trust up, because obviously the drug wars have been going on for a long time. People have their own personal opinion about dealers and users. Our thing is we just want to make sure people stay alive. We want them to be healthy and we want them to be well. That's obviously why you got into the job. So we're starting to see a lot more people joining with us and a lot more people in recovery. A lot of times that doesn't get in the news, but when you have someone who got into recovery or they've been in recovery for a year or several years, now they become our partners and we can join with them and advocate. So there is good news stories. It does get overwhelming. There's not a doubt. And I always, I'm sure you guys do this too, but around here in the heroin world, we always talk about the starfish parable where this young boy's walking down the beach and there's tens of thousands of starfish. Yeah. And he's throwing them in the ocean and the old guy comes up and says, "You'll never make a difference. There's too many. It's too overwhelming." He picks up a starfish, throws it in the ocean, says, "I saved that one." That's kind of the mentality you have to have. But, you said something that was kind of fascinating. I've never really heard anyone say that, is law enforcement is always in crisis mode. So it really kind of hit me there when you just said that. So you do got to take time. And I think we're more aware of it within our inner circle. We understand or see when we get burned out and we start taking time, because we can't help somebody if we're not feeling right or if we're sick.
That's true. And I trained pretty much the whole state of New Jersey Police Department in addiction and what to do. And the one thing I noticed was burnout. And not only that, I had 3,000 people at one point when I was speaking, and I had two come up afterwards and tell me, "I'm using and I can't tell the force. And what do I do?" Yeah. So I had that happen. So it wasn't just the PTSD and the crisis, but also what do I do? And then when I trained down here in Fort Lauderdale, I trained the firefighters, and I had one come up to me afterwards and he goes, "I'm stuck on opiates and I'm driving the bus." And I'm like, "Well, you can't be driving the bus on opiates." So it's not even just contained to the population. It bleeds over to every job out there. And then with you guys constantly being in crisis and seeing all this stuff, it definitely affects you guys as a whole as well.
Yeah. And I was just thinking when you were talking, and we're not good at communicating and we're really good at holding stuff in, because a lot of times you got to compartmentalize it to be able to go on to the next call, the next issue. And it does get overwhelming, and there are times that you can't see the other end. So I think one of the things that I've been able to do, or I do it on purpose, and it does open me up to criticism and judgment, but I tend to write a lot, both for papers or if I'm talking, I'm very open about what I've experienced. So I wrote an article after the one brother died, and I was very open about what I saw with the family, the empathy I felt for them, that I wasn't going to look at him as just a drug addict, but a kid that was lost. And I really put myself out there, and I thought, oh man, if I put myself out there, I'm going to get my head chopped off, which I did. I definitely got some backlash, but what it did, it allowed other people to open up and tell their stories. I was astonished. It was shared on Cincinnati.com about 10,000 times within a couple of weeks. And I got letters, hundreds of letters and emails from judges and doctors and lawyers. And I realized that when you open yourself up and talk, you allow other people to do the same. You're giving them permission to be vulnerable. And yes, you may get some pushback, you may get criticism, but if you can be vulnerable, then we can have these discussions. And I always tell people that's what helps me get through it, is when I write something, when I write an article, or I write on my blog, or I talk to somebody, or if I'm emotional in front of somebody. I want that out so that I'm not holding it in. So maybe there's another part of this, and I was just thinking of this when you're saying that. Maybe part of this is time for first responders, and with us coming out and advocating more, maybe it's time that we heal ourselves through this too. Maybe this epidemic is the avenue that allows us to do that, because we've gotten a lot of compassion from people. There's a lot of people who see how overwhelming it is and say, you know what, we care about you, we're thinking about you. And then people like you who are going out and instructing us and teaching us about PTSD and teaching us how to deal with addiction and teaching us compassion and empathy. I think it'll make a difference in the long run.
I agree. And I think it's not just that. It's having worked with, with police officers and EMT and firefighters, the one thing I noticed is that when you're a first responder, it's that fight or flight. You guys are in flight so much that you operate in flight all the time and you guys never relax. That's the first thing. And the second thing is you never share your day because you don't want to burden your significant other of all the garbage that happened, and you don't want that to tell them, I saw a car crash and I held a dead baby. You don't want to burden them with that. So you hold it in and it bottles up and bottles up and bottles up. And then bam, you guys break down. You either have PTSD or you need time off or you end up, in this case, the firefighter that approached me, it was exactly that. He had responded to a scene and there was a dead baby and he couldn't handle it. And I said, well, did you go to counseling? And he said they didn't give us counseling. There was no counseling. And I said, well, step one, you need grief counseling. You need grief and loss counseling. You need PTSD counseling. And I got him into EMDR therapy with a great EMDR therapist. He called me 3 weeks later. He's like, I'm ready to quit opiates. And bam, we got him sober and got him back on the job and he did fantastic. And he said, thank you for listening, because he told me the whole story and he goes, you didn't even react. I said, I've been doing this so long. I have heard everything that I wasn't there. So I'm not emotionally involved. I can detach. I can listen. I can be empathetic and I can get you the help you need because that's my job, and then I can let it go. So he's like, how do you do that? I said, I've been doing this 25 years. It's kind of, you got to learn how to do it. So it was nice to be able to help him and then to see how he got back in there and helped more people. And I think with education and training like you're doing and like I'm doing, I think as we keep pushing it, we'll get more and more people involved to help instead of hurt.
Yeah, you've definitely seen a shift. And I remember every death. And one of my first ones was a car accident with the kids sitting there watching their mom die. And my training was 5 days. I had 5 days of field training.
Wow.
Small town. So a lot of mine was life experience. And it, what it really did, because I didn't have, there was no formal education, no training. We weren't talking about PTSD back in 1993 when it first started. The department was a bunch of older, crusty guys who had been through more than I could ever imagine. And they didn't talk either. So I learned how to grieve on my own. And that's exactly what I did, was I grieved. So I would go home and I would let it out, go through the emotions, and I still do it on an incident. We had a Cincinnati police officer shot and killed a couple of years ago, and I went to that call. And my friends called me up and they were being good and they were trying, hey, you okay? And I said, look, you got to give me 3 days. Just let me have 3 days. I'll be okay. Let me go through it. Let me experience it. Let me get it out. And then I can start processing it. But no one really taught you. You're doing it now. And now you're starting to see that shift. But I hope that there's more people like you and more people who are out there teaching first responders about PTSD and how to process it, how to grieve, how to let it out. And that way it doesn't bottle up and build up. Because part of what happens is, so burnout, we call it first responder fatigue here with the opiate epidemic. It's not a matter of being tired. So a lot of people think, oh, they're just tired going call to call to call. No, we love going call to call to call because there is a part of us that likes that adrenaline. Mm-hmm. So the call to call is not a big deal. What it is we go somewhere we don't feel like we can help. Then on top of all the bad things you see, you start getting even, like you're talking about, even more depressed. And maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's smoking, suicidal thoughts, or maybe it's drugs. And that's the way a lot of people are coping. So having these discussions, talking about the opiate epidemic, the first responder fatigue, and getting it out there that here's what I tell people. No one teaches a cop or a firefighter or a first responder how to feel helpless. No one taught me.
That's where I work most of my time because I am helpless. I have no control over human behavior. That's step one in counseling, therapy, and coaching. If the person wants to make the changes, I can help them. But this is what I say, and you can share this with your fellow officers. My theory is I can give you the toolbox. I can give you all the tools to build the house. But if you sit down and prop your feet up on the toolbox, the house doesn't get built because I'm not going to build it for you. Mm-hmm. And that seems to sink in with people because it's like, I can't own your behavior. I can give you the toolbox, but if you don't build it, there's nothing I can do. Absolutely.
There's many, and here's what I never expected being a cop, and it ties into the opiate epidemic and addiction. I never expected to feel helpless. I never expected to feel like I couldn't help someone or make a difference. And there's things in life that you can't help. That auto accident. Mm-hmm. I had no clue the mother was dying and the kids are screaming. No one ever taught me that. No one ever taught me to go to a call where you see a police officer who's been shot laying on the ground. No one ever taught you that. No one ever taught you that you'll have mothers and fathers come in begging you to save their kid who's on opiates and they're going to die. Mm-hmm. Those help feelings, ends up, that's what I think most first responders struggle with, because we get into this. The vast majority of us, I know that policing sometimes is not seen as the greatest thing from a lot in social media lately, but the vast majority of police officers, firefighters get into this job because they want to help people and make a difference. As a police chief, when I interview every young kid, hey, why do you want to be a cop? Oh, I want to help people. That's what I've heard for the past 30 years. So when you realize that you can't, that hits you really hard. It's a shock to the system. So we sit down with our young people and tell them, look, there's going to be times when you're helpless. There's going to be times when you're the victim. You won't anticipate yourself being the victim. We're not saying stay the victim, but just realize you're going to get caught off guard. There's something that's going to hit you, something you're not prepared for. You'll see something, hear something, you'll do something. So just be prepared for that feeling of helplessness. And then even though you don't make the situation better, it's not the outcome you want, at least it's a little bit easier for you to start accepting, talking about, and processing.
That's great. And that's great advice for anybody even listening as a takeaway to get started with how to get the process going and how to feel, because sometimes you're right. You have these parents that are they're pulling their hair out. They don't know what to do, and they just want you to save their son or daughter, and their son or daughter doesn't want to be saved. They're enjoying the process, and mom and dad are doing everything wrong instead of what they should be doing right. And they're coming to you with, help me do something. And then generally we step in. There's sometimes I tell the parents, the best thing for your child is to go to jail. And I'm going to just tell you that. And they get mad. And I say, you know what? This is going to be the stopping block. There's a record. They're going to dry out in there. It may not seem like you're in control of the situation and it's a good idea, but it's a great idea. And that may change their life. So it's so interesting. Now, I also I wanted to tell you, if you run into any parents who lost a child to addiction, we offer free classes. So free recovery coaching, free family coaching for them to become a coach to help other parents through this process. So.
And that's the tools we need. So it's interesting when you're talking about that. I was talking to them just a couple hours ago at a luncheon. We, the police officer, firefighter, are looked at to solve addiction, poverty, domestic violence, all the ills of the world. It comes on our heads. And you know how much I've become this quote unquote national, international expert on addiction, on fentanyl and synthetics. And my thing I always tell people, I have zero specialized training in addiction. I have zero training in being a doctor. I have zero training in family counseling. I have none of this stuff, but all of this falls onto us. So I'm hoping one of the things I can do with getting the word out and using this platform is to transition from the first responder being the one that bears the burden to being that link to experts like you, experts within the system that we can link people to, so that the burden doesn't necessarily fall on us, not just because I don't want it on us, but because that's not what we're trained to do. And there's no way to train one individual for all the issues we see. So we got to have systems and connections and resources better connected so that when something happens, a first responder can immediately link that person to that care, to that resources they need, whether it's a family member who needs support, whether it's someone in addiction, or whether it's someone in poverty or dealing with mental health. We've got to do a better job of that. So that's what I'm hoping that my role in this is maybe one day when I retire, I can look back and see that I had made a difference in strengthening those connections.
Well, that's awesome. And I'll help you any way I possibly can. So if you want training for the officers, it's obviously free. Anything they want to take, any of the classes, we have 40 classes and 30 teachers. They're welcome to it. If they want to learn anything or have some more resources, we're here to be available and to assist. And that's why I started what I did. My goal was to create an army of trained professionals anywhere in the world that could step in and help first responders and help the situation, as opposed to going, I don't know what to do. Who do I call? They can jump in and make the phone calls and be there to assist you. So you could hand it off to them and they could go, we got this. We'll get them into treatment. We'll get them help. We'll get them sober. And then they can come back to you and say, thank you for saving my life. So if we all work together, I think we can accomplish that goal.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. I mean, would you have imagined? I could have never imagined this 25, 26 years ago that we would be working with addiction specialists, with communities, with the faith-based community, with business community, with all these partners coming in. Because, I mean, think about it. Law enforcement firefighters, we were meant to do this on our own. And I think we were starting to see we can do this on our own and we need this help. So, And it also makes the community better too, because we're all part of that. And when we're working together and we're sharing our resources and our knowledge and expertise, it makes us healthier. It makes the communities healthier. So it has been, of all the things I'm probably the most proud to see and just in awe, it is how the community responds to all of this. It is no longer that cop just walking a beat. It literally is an entire community working together on these social issues. And I think in the long run, it's going to be more cohesive, more efficient, and that will be the model that everybody uses.
Well, you've heard the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. And we got so far away from that with, well, it's mom and dad and the kid. And, the cops are bad. Don't get arrested. Don't do anything stupid. It's been like that for a while. And that's not how there's no cohesion in that. We're not raising our kids together. If we raise our kids together and deal with these problems together, we'll solve them together. Burying them under the carpet like we've been doing for the past 20 years and pretending they're not happening is not going to solve the issue. So it's nice to see that we have your support. And it's nice to see, I'm sure on your side, that you have our support, that we're all here for the common good.
Absolutely. We're breaking down I tell people, they always tell me to break down the silos, and I don't agree with that. You're the expert at what you do. I'm the expert at what I do. What we should have is a front door and a back door. We should have those doors wide open. I should be able to go to the front door through your silo, come out the back with some expertise, and you vice versa. And if we have a bunch of silos where the doors are unlocked, we start working better as a community. So no, you're absolutely right. And that's one of the things I'm really excited about, that this is, if there's a silver lining in this with all the misery, the silver lining is that we're working more closely, and I think in the long run it's going to make a big difference working as a community, like you said.
I agree, because I think the old adage was, you're using drugs, it's a violation, it's illegal, arrest you, throw you in jail, but then there was no now what? Because they're going to go back out and use again. So we're the now what? We're the let's pick it up on the back end, and we'll fix the problems on the back end and get you where you need to be so you don't go back into jail, which now we're working together, which is really nice, because there are clients that absolutely need to be in jail. I will, hands down, I've turned them in and said, you got to go. You're not following any protocol. Time to go. And then I have clients that I'm just like looking at them thinking, you have a criminal record and you're still doing this, and the jail didn't stop you. Then what else is going to stop you? You've been Narcaned, you've been arrested, you have 3 DUIs, you're still driving your car drunk. Nothing has stopped you. It's either going to be your health or you're going to kill somebody. So working together has been so beneficial. I'll give you an example. I had a client that I had to call and have arrested while driving drunk, and he got mad at me. And I said, we have a deal. You're going to drive drunk. I'm going to turn you in. It's that simple. And he goes, well, I can't believe you did that. And I said, you're driving in the car up 95 drunk. What do you think I'm going to do? Sit here and let you kill somebody? And he got arrested and got a DUI. He gets so mad at me. And 2 years later, he came to me and he said, I want to thank you for turning me in. He goes, jail was the best thing that ever happened to me. He goes, I was so mad at you. He got a year. He got a full year in there. And he goes, I was so mad at you. And about 6 months in, one of his cellmates said, why are you mad at her? You're the dumbass driving up and down 95 drunk. And he just sat there and he just realized, he's like, it is me. It is my problem. And he goes, I would never have realized that, because he was going to high-end rehab after high-end rehab, and mom and dad bailed him out. It took that for him to go, oh my God, I put myself here. So it's great that we're all working together and we can pool our resources.
Yeah, and we got to have different avenues. So there's some people who are going to get in treatment. It's going to help. Some people can do it on their own, but then some people need jail, like you said. So we got to have all these avenues. And I think that's one of the things when we work as a community, we open up those doors and those avenues, and it allows us to find out what fits best for the right person. It's interesting that you had that story. So I was working out one day, and this guy came up to me. He's got a weight in his hand, and he goes, hey, you're the cop that arrested me. And I was like, oh man, this is not the way I'm not going on a bench press with some dude smashing my head in. And I go, well, what did I arrest you for? I didn't remember. And he said, I was drinking and driving. And he said the same thing that you just said. He goes, you saved my life, and I want to thank you. I was like, well, put the weight down first. We'll shake hands.
Yeah.
You got to have those different avenues. It takes a different avenue for different people.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great talking to you. And I think it's a lot of good information for our listeners. How can people find you? How can they reach out and talk to you?
Well, they can get a hold of me either by email, tsynan@thevillageofnewtown.com, or I'm on Facebook. Just look up Tom Synan and it'll have it there. Twitter is Tom T Synan 11. And that's the way they can find me.
Awesome. And we'll put all those links up for you
If you Google Tom Synan, you'll be able to find it. Tom Synan is kind of a unique name. The Synan name's kind of unique. You'll be able to find it.
Very cool. And we're going to put all that up with your bio and photo so they can click on everything and it'll take them right to all of your social media.
Great. Hey, thanks for having me on. It was an absolute pleasure. And thanks for everything you're doing.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Unpause Your Life. This is Dr. Callie Estes with my guest, Tom Synan. Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the show today. Head on over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and leave a comment or review of what you think. Or contact us at 1-800-706-0318. If you want to be on our show, feel free to email or call. And if you have a topic, feel free to email or call as well.
Thanks for listening to Unpause Your Life. For show notes and more, head on over to unpauseyourlife.com.
Big shout out to recoveryinnovators.com for help producing this show. Thank you guys.
I took a walk down the long road where they said that I shouldn't go. On my way found a reason to wake up another day. But they needed to show you all the things that you won't do. Find faith or religion, but nothing to show for it. No need to escape in love with my pain. I may be weak, but I'm alive, still alive, and I won't be bound by your mistake. No, I won't be your enemy, trapped at the gate. Bring me to life, put me to death. Just give me something that's just not so hard to believe. To believe. To believe. I took a walk down the dark road where they said that I shouldn't go. I knew the dangers of flying. Now I'm so far from solid ground. But they needed to show you all the things that you won't do. Find faith or religion, but nothing